Well, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to you all. I'm Hugh Edwards from Gomo Learning, and welcome to today's webinar on 5 ways to supercharge your e-learning culture. We'll be starting off in just a few minutes. We've had a fantastic response to this webinar, so we're going to give everyone a chance to tune in. But just while we do that, those of you who've attended our webinars before might be familiar with our global weather report, where we just ask you about where you are and what the weather's like. And it's a way for us to get used to using the questions panel in GoToWebinar, which you should see on your screen there. So if you could just take a moment to open up the question panel and just let us know where you are and what the weather's like. So just to get us started, here in Brighton on England's south coast, it's a beautiful spring afternoon here. The sun is shining and the sea is looking absolutely lovely today. So looks as if winter is finally behind us. So do just find that question panel and just let us know where you are and what the weather is like there. So you should find the question panel just there. And I think across here in the UK, it's definitely spring. Spring is definitely in the air, and we can see we've got lots of people joining. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning into today's webinar. I'm Hugh Edwards from Gomo Learning. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Just want to give more people a chance to tune in, and just while we're doing that, if you just joined, what we're doing is just opening up the question panel, and we're just asking you to let us know where you are and what the weather's like. So I can see that Gemma's in Ledbury in Hertfordshire, lovely part of England, and Gemma, you're saying it's a lovely day, but just starting to go grey now. And welcome, Marnie, that you're in Syracuse in New York. So sunny, but only 34 degrees. Snowstorm expected this weekend. Oh, wow. So it seems as if winter isn't quite behind you there. And Stacey, you're saying that it's overcast in Maryland in the United States. So welcome. We appreciate you tuning in today. And for those of you, I can see we've got lots more people tuning in. If you're wondering what we're doing here, we're just practicing using the question panel, because this is a way for you to ask questions and add your own thoughts and comments as we go through today's webinar. So do just open up that panel and let us know where you are and what the weather's like. It gives us a good snapshot of the weather around the world. So surprisingly, at the moment, it looks as if we seem to be doing the best in terms of weather over here in the UK, and we're seeing that snowstorms are expected in New York by the weekend. So Susan, you're saying in Missouri, 80 degrees a few days ago and snow expected tomorrow. Wow! So it seems if you've gone from one season back to winter there. So we're just waiting for lots more people I can see tuning in. So welcome everybody. Welcome to this latest webinar from Gomo Learning. I'm Hugh Edwards. I'm also joined here by my colleague Simon Waldron, and we'll be starting shortly. But do keep those comments going about what it's like where you are in terms of the weather. I just used the question panel, and Eric in Quebec in Canada saying 1 degree and partly cloudy. So sounding pretty chilly there. And so we can see a few more people joining. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining in our global weather report there. So let's get started here. So to welcome you formally to our Gomo webinar. So today's webinar we'll be looking at 5 ways to supercharge your e-learning culture. So I'm Hugh Edwards from Gomo Learning, and I'm also joined here on the webinar today by Simon Waldron, our Customer Success Manager here. So just before we have a look at the introduction, the agenda for today, I just wanted to tell you a bit about ourselves as a company for those of you who aren't familiar with Gomo Learning. So we're part of the Learning Technologies group of companies. So you can see here the structure of our company, and I'm sure that you'll recognize there'll be some familiar names there. So companies like Rusticy, Watershed with their fantastic learning analytics, People Fluent, and then in terms of the services side, Leo, the experts in content creation, and most recently GP Strategies have joined the LTG family as well. So we sit in Gomo Learning, but we work very closely with the other experts in learning technologies and the rest of LTG. So Simon, just over to you to introduce today's subject.
Thank you very much, Hugh, and it's great to be here, everyone. So thank you for such a global audience. And just I'll add to that weather check that we were having, Hugh. It's fantastic to hear from everybody and almost see that it's a little cooler than what it is where I am in central England. It's surprisingly sunny and 14 degrees. So usually it's a little colder and a little rainy. So please do keep that coming in. It's fascinating, but obviously, hopefully the snow isn't too extreme from what we can see across the pond. But in terms of our introduction, like everyone here, we understand that e-learning is an important part of a person's journey with your company. And it's just as important, for your current and future business goals. But sometimes it isn't always a top priority for employees. And that's often because the learning programs can be unengaging and take them away from their day-to-day deadlines or projects. We know how everyone is super busy. But hopefully this webinar will help you and your L&D departments maybe take a step back and identify better ways to make sure your e-learning courses get people motivated to learn, maybe through more engagement. In turn, you'll be able to create a solid culture of learning where employees can grow and help the company succeed. And I always ask myself this question, and I would recommend everyone else does, and that do you feel that there are any areas of your current learning programs that could benefit from a fresh look and maybe a different approach to the learning content? And if your answer is yes, I'd like to say that you're in the right place today for us to give you lots of top tips of how you can perhaps improve what you have or build what you need to do to improve on that learning culture. So let's take a look at the agenda for today. As mentioned, you'll note throughout this webinar, we're going to offer all of those tips and tricks to help you supercharge your company's e-learning culture, reinforcing that for yourself, your L&D teams, and your whole business. The areas we're going to cover, we're going to take a look at how we can help you make your courses more visually appealing, how you can build engaging assessments to make sure courses are appropriate for global learners and your full audience, how to improve accessibility and inclusivity, and how to revisit your blended learning approach. So throughout the session today, Hugh and I will be delivering different parts of the agenda. So taking a look at our first agenda point, and that is to make sure your courses are visually appealing, because if you're spending hours creating e-learning content, your hope is that it will catch the attention of as many learners as possible. With the many distractions we all face daily, from emails to impromptu requests to smartphone notifications, if you're like me, you're sort of always online now, always available. And it's difficult to find time even between meetings, especially when it's virtual. So what we want to do is support you in having a look at how you can make your courses truly engaging and keep your learners' attention. So color schemes matter, and we have that here to choose wisely. And that's because when you're developing your e-learning content, whether that's the colors, the graphics, content placement, or overall formatting, every aspect, every little detail matters. Keeping in line with your brand's image is especially important if you want learners to associate the learning content with their day-to-day responsibilities. So going beyond just a brand compliant, but having that consistency. Take a scientific approach. Psychology says that certain colors can influence a person's behavior and their ability to learn. Color may even affect the neurological pathways in the brain and impact a person's mood. These factors can play a role in whether or not people will actually connect with and retain that knowledge that you deliver through your e-learning courses. To pay attention to contrast and placement. Because if you've ever experienced an e-learning course or really any sort of digital content where you've had to squint to see it, it's just really difficult to sort of to view, to navigate. This could probably be down to a poor choice in font size, color, contrast, navigation, or maybe all of the above. I'm sure we have sort of different experience of that, but I'd like to think we can all agree that then there needs to be changes with that. And to avoid contrast issues, it may be that you choose background colors that act as a canvas for your content, but it has to be sort of considered from an accessibility perspective too. And Hugh will provide a little bit more on that later in the session. But a dark background should have lighter text and vice versa. For example, if you're creating a course and you feel the urge to use a yellow font on a light background, you're most likely best to reconsider that in terms of whether that's going to be visible and viewable for your audience. And remember that learners are very likely to view your courses on different screen configurations to your own. What seems like perfectly contrasted, easily readable text on your screen may be impossible to read on theirs. And this is one of the many reasons we recommend that you test your courses on multiple devices. And if learners have a tough time deciphering text, they're not likely to stick around, as we're sort of reinforcing here. We need to make sure it's engaging, that it's accessible, and that they find it easy to navigate and view that content and have a great experience. And it's okay, if you're not a graphic designer, that's perfectly fine. And something later in the session we're going to do is provide some resources where you can get access to royalty-free graphics and multimedia in general that can certainly help you get started or even use if you're an advanced user of an e-learning authoring tool. The area here of don't keep them separated. We're talking about the visuals here and graphics, because the law of proximity states that our brains and eyes will assume relationships between items that are close or in close proximity to one another. For instance, if several images are grouped together at the bottom of a page, our mind will assume that they're connected somehow, simply based on their similar position on the page. So if you're grouping together random images that aren't somehow related, this could be confusing to the learner. Therefore, it's best to ensure that the content is relevant to the learning objectives and it supports the narrative and learning journey. And of course, there are instances of appropriate distraction where there could be a particular background used to maybe separate screens, because that could provide visual interest and a natural break. But the recommendation would be to experiment and review user feedback to improve that user experience and learning outcomes. And really ensure that if you are going to have those, let's say those graphics in this context across a particular part of the screen, that they are relevant to that learning outcome. And they're not just a random selection because they look aesthetically pleasing, but they serve no purpose to help that learner achieve all of the knowledge that they need to proceed and succeed. But also to help you get started with your current projects, I'm going to send a link that provides a great list of libraries for free and open source images, videos, sounds, fonts, templates, and everything else in between. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to provide that to you. I'm going to put that into the chat. So please do feel free to have a look at that at your own leisure. But what I'm going to do now is hand over to Hugh so he can show you how and the top tips for building engaging assessments. And over to you, Hugh.
Hi, can you hear me, Simon?
I can hear you perfectly
Okay.
well, Hugh.
Apologies, I had a mute button there. Okay, so let's have a look at building engaging assessments. Um, while many people might enjoy predictability, that this isn't always the best approach when it comes to learning. After all, as they say, that variety is the spice of life. So, in the case of assessments, it might even help you to create the secret sauce that your learning program needs. So, keeping this in mind, start taking stock of how easy is it for you to perform knowledge checks in different ways. So whether you're looking to identify the unique learning style of a specific learner or you're creating new learning goals, assessments can help with both and everything in between. So there are several things to look at when deciding on what kind of updates you'll need to make to your assessment approach. And you'll want to make these updates if you're keen to maybe track learner progress in an effort to adjust the pace of a course, to adapt your learning to meet the changes to business goals, to keep learners motivated and help them apply the skills they've learned. But also to provide L&D teams, learning and development teams, with meaningful feedback on the impact of the learning, and to measure competencies against internal and external factors. And if learners aren't engaging with the assessments or the feedback you're receiving isn't helpful, that's a clear sign that you need to redefine your methods. Otherwise, learners might feel as if the assessments are simply another chore. So this could lead to inaccurate feedback or data that simply isn't helpful. So your authoring tool should be versatile enough that your assessments enforce your learning goals and mix up the question types and make your assessments interactive, fun and stimulating. And this varied approach can help you identify any learning gaps along the way. So the sort of things to look out for are using things like drop-down lists, multiple selection options, drag and drop answers. It can really be interactive and engaging for your learners, and multiple choice questions, text and numerical fields. So for example, if the goal is to test critical understanding or reasoning, giving learners a short form text box rather than multiple choice can be a great way to capture that in that more sort of informal way to say, what are your thoughts about this subject, to engage them more. And also think about things like timed quizzes, countdown timers, and so forth. That almost adding that element of gamification and almost a sense of jeopardy into the assessments. And if you're looking to identify learner competency in the workplace, say with safety protocols, then you might consider using interactive images. So things like hotspot images, so they have to click on the correct part of an image to be able to identify hazards, for example. So bear in mind to look at what range of different question types that you have available in your authoring tool, and mix those about to really engage the learner. And the third area that we're looking at here is to make sure that courses are appropriate for global learners. Now, if you've ever visited a different country and were faced with a language barrier or even other cultural nuances that you didn't understand, then you know how challenging this can be. Now imagine that you're dealing with those things while you're also trying to learn a new skill. So it's not very conducive to engaging with or retaining the information. So it's important to overcome this barrier and make sure that you're offering learning content that's appropriate and welcoming for global learners. So with the right authoring tool, translating your learning content isn't as difficult as it sounds, because there's a format called XLIF, which is the international common standard for easily exchanging multilingual content with translators. So authoring tools like our Gomo platform use this format to handle the import and export of translations. So in Gomo specifically, this can be done in over 150 languages, and the process is as simple as designing and delivering the course in an initial master language, so that might be, say, English, then setting up the additional languages that you want the course course to be translated into, and looking at both not only the language but the regional variation. So, for example, rather than it just being generic Spanish, targeting it, say, for Mexican learners. And then you just export all of that text, tagging it with the appropriate languages into this XLIF format. You then just send that to your translation agency. Because it's this international standard, any translation agency should understand that format. They'll translate it not only with the correct language, but the correct region. So they'll be using the correct spelling, they'll be using the correct idioms for that particular region. And then you simply re-import that back into your GOMO course. So do look out for this XLIF format in your authoring tool, because it can really simplify how you work with your translation agencies. And you can read more about this process in an ebook that we have about XLIF and everything you need to know to create multi-language learning. And you'll find that in the resources section of our website. And we'll try and put a link onto that later. The other thing is about actually localizing it as well. So delivering content to your global learners can be a fun process. You get to learn more about the different cultures and personalize the content to fit, which is key component about keeping people engaged. So just consider these other ways to localize your learning content beyond just simple language translation. So use photography, visuals, and other media based on the specific region learners are in. For example, an EMEA employee might not feel included if the only imagery or media they see is of a North American office and the stock photos of workers across the US. This could lead to them disengaging from the learning content, or feel that they're not being represented. Also be mindful of design and landscape in public spaces. So obviously the architecture in London is vastly different to that of Bogota in Colombia. So colors, fonts, and markings of road signs can all be a signal to a person that the place that they're looking at is halfway around the world and really not connecting with them. Also, this could be a really subtle but important point, that pay attention to gestures. Even details as small as gestures that are commonplace and non-offensive in your culture might be considered offensive in other parts of the world. You should therefore be really mindful when using stock imagery, and we recommend working with someone actually in the region that you're targeting for those learners to make sure that you're designing content um, and uncover subtle details like the appropriate gestures to be representing. So do bear that in mind for your global audience. The fourth point here is we're going to have a look at improving accessibility and inclusivity. So when we create e-learning content, we should do so with every learner type in mind. This includes learners who need specific accommodation for things like visual or hearing impairments, but also those maybe who have cognitive impairments. And the following are just a few of the ways you can make sure that you can provide fun and engaging learning for everyone. So keep contrast high. That we mentioned this earlier when we discussed ways to make your courses more visually appealing. So high contrast themes will have been designed with text that meets accessibility contrast standard, and be careful not to undermine that by changing the color of the background or using an unsuitably dark or light image. Remember that you're trying to make sure that your learning is going to work for the widest range of your learners. And keep your language inclusive. So truly inclusive learning content needs to be able to address any potential learner in a relevant and non-exclusionary way. Because selected with no ill intent, certain word choices and phrases can subtly undermine how welcoming text is to certain groups. For a quick example is that instructing learners to have a look at this might be really alienating to a learner with a severe visual impairment. So bear those kind of language issues in mind in your learning design. And also, when using images, make sure to use the alt text correctly. So the alt text is the text that is going to be read out by a screen reader, such as JAWS, the text description. And you need to use that appropriately so that your learners aren't going to miss out. But also remember that if your image is only decorative, the correct thing to do is actually leave the field empty altogether. It's only if that image is actually going to convey something from a learning perspective then somebody will want that read out with the screen reader. So a user with a visual impairment doesn't want to be told that your decorated background on your page is a matrix style falling numbers. So use your alt text appropriately. So I hope that gives you some tips there in terms of inclusivity and accessibility. And I'm going to hand back to Simon.
Thank you very much, Hugh. That was fantastic. Just to sort of talk a little bit more about building engaging assessments and making sure that your courses are appropriate for your global learners. And as you just covered there, improving accessibility and inclusivity. What we've done at the moment, just in the chat for everyone's attention, you can see that we put the link in there as well, which covers the XLIF ebook, which is everything you need to know to create a multi-language e-learning course. And I think something certainly we picked up over the last couple of years is that real sort of importance of ensuring that things are far more accessible and far more inclusive, and making sure that we are building content that works on all types of devices, anytime, anywhere. And certainly what you can see so far with what Hugh has been demonstrating is the need to have a tool that has that flexibility and power for you as designers to create that content and provide that visual interest, that interactivity. And something we'll take a look at now is revisiting your blended learning approach, because as businesses, we've started to roll out that hybrid approach that I mentioned, which includes in-person and remote, but we also need to be prepared to create and deliver a blended learning experience, because this level of personalization can keep learners engaged and meet them where they are and from wherever they are. So blending all of those types of learning solutions to ensure you have a fantastic experience and learning outcome for your learners. So breaking that down a little bit more, we have micro-learning for all. And that's whether you're delivering that in-person training or to someone that's working from home. Micro-learning is essential for everyone. We're all stretched, as we mentioned earlier in the session, for time these days. And often we find it difficult to fit learning into our schedules. So microlearning is a great addition to any blended learning program, as it offers something for everyone and is a quick win for content authors. It's also important to remember that we're all going through a period of transition, and things will likely continue to shift and change in our daily lives. And that's another reason microlearning is the key to success for your learners, because these bite-sized chunks of content can greatly reduce the need for a massive time commitment, whilst also helping people access timely learning content, but importantly, accessing that content when they need it. It can become far more social in the way you approach micro-learning, and it could be as simple as a 60 to 90-second video that you're making available. That's something that's been developed by a subject matter expert in collaboration with an L&D team. And that really feeds into encouraging that user-generated content, because who's better to train the people than the people who work alongside them? And the great thing about a cloud-based authoring tool is that you can have multiple people working on an e-learning course at the same time. And this allows for a broad group of individuals to author learning content, from, as we mentioned, subject matter experts to senior team members and everyone in between. It offers a new perspective that L&D teams might not have had. It's a great place to encourage that user-generated content. And one place in particular is onboarding content for remote workers. Someone with more experience in your company will understand the nuances of everyday life while working from home. Plus, this approach can add more personality to your learning content. It become a little more real for the learners who are experiencing that content from subject matter expert that perhaps work alongside them, work with them, and just building all of that and taking all of that knowledge from everybody and feeding that into your learning curriculum can be really, really powerful for user engagement too. And really, really important. It can be so easy to sort of develop all this content and release, but really we want to also ensure that we assess whether it all works and what the measurement for that is, because it really is important to measure the impact of training, the training you create, and map whether it has a real impact on your business. And at the very least, your assessment should show whether learners are taking away the right ideas and behaviors. You may also look to feedback forms or more advanced measurements, and they can include things like rich, detailed analytics, those insights that you can get via XAPI. And having those insights, it makes it easier to adopt your learning to fit the needs of everyone in your organization. Because with a blended learning approach, you'll need to account for the in-person as well as those working from home, and consider that every person will have unique needs. And they may even have a different setup at home than they do in the office, going back to those device types. Your assessments can provide critical information on how, when, and why your employees engage with the learning that you deliver, and also importantly, why they don't. So I'm going to pass over to Hugh, who can provide more information on another fantastic ebook that we have for you.
Thank you, Simon. And Simon, could I just check that I am actually unmuted this time?
I can hear you perfectly well,
That's
Hugh.
excellent. Right. Well, thank you. And we hope that that the areas that we've been discussing today are going to start generating ideas and get you thinking about how you can improve your company's e-learning culture. And if you'd like to explore this in more depth, we do have an ebook that that accompanies this, and we're just going to just paste the link again into the chat. So let me just pop that in there. So you should see that coming through in the chat. And if you click on that, you'll be able to download the ebook and explore these areas that we've been looking at in more depth. And also, what we'd like to do is also just ask you a question here that in particular, we're just going to pop a poll here to see how we can help further. And here you should see the quick poll there, that if you'd like to actually try Gomo out for yourself, to be able to try all the features like the multi-language course building, the regionalization and localization, to have a look at the areas of accessibility, explore all the different methods that you have for assessments that we looked at earlier, then we could very happy to set you up with a 21-day trial of Gomo. Also, we'd be very happy if you'd like to take a deep dive with us into Gomo to explore some of those areas and look at your requirements and ideas in more depth. Then please do let us know as well. We'd be very happy to set that up. So if those are of interest to you, just click one or more options there, and we'll just wait a few moments just while people have a chance to register their interest. So whether you'd like to just try out Gomo or whether you'd like to talk to us about your requirements and have a look at Gomo in more depth with us, then please do let us know. So thank you very much. I'll just close that. And we'd just like to say thank you very much for joining us today. That we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join in with us. And we hope that we found it useful, and also the accompanying ebook. Do let us know if you'd like us to set up a trial. You can always go to our website, gomolearning.com, to find more resources and also to be able to sign up for a free trial from there as well. So we'd just like to wish you all the best for the rest of the day, wherever you are in the world and whatever the weather's like. And we look forward to welcoming you to one of our future Gomo Learning webinars.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Hugh, and thank you everybody for your time.